Welcome back to Faces the Podcast.
Yes.
And today we're going to be doing a deep dive into a story about how faith
Okay.
can ripple outwards and create unexpected change.
Right.
And it's all about this young man named David from South Africa
Okay.
and his encounter with evangelist Reinhard Bonnke.
Wow. So what's so fascinating about this story is that it really highlights the potential for growth that exists within each of us.
Oh, yeah.
David's journey shows that a single interaction can really spark incredible transformation.
To me,
Not just for the individual, but for the community as well.
right. We're talking about a massive crusade in the South African wilderness.
Wow.
Thousands of people.
Yeah.
The source material describes this like electric atmosphere.
Oh, wow.
And it's right after this huge event that David seeks out Bonnke.
Really?
So I'm curious, what do you make of David's decision to approach Bonnke for the baptism of the Holy Spirit in that moment?
I think it speaks to a real hunger for deeper understanding, you know?
Mhm.
David could have easily stopped at simply accepting Christ,
Right.
but he wanted more.
Yeah.
He actively sought out further spiritual growth.
And it sounds like a pretty intense experience.
Oh, yeah.
David describes it as lightning striking him,
Wow.
feeling this powerful electricity.
Oh,
It makes you wonder, what role do these types of intensely personal experiences
yeah.
play in shaping someone's faith journey?
That's a great question.
Uh-huh.
I think they can be incredibly powerful catalysts for change,
Yeah.
but it's important to note that these experiences are just the beginning.
Okay.
It's what comes after that truly matters.
Right.
How does that experience shape their actions?
Right.
How do they use it to impact the world around them?
Okay, so fast forward 4 weeks, and word gets back to Bonnke about this revival
Okay.
happening in the same area where he met David.
Wow.
And guess who's leading it?
Oh, no way.
It's like this incredible echo of Bonnke's own ministry
yeah.
happening through this young man he briefly encountered.
It really makes you think about the power of mentorship,
Oh, yeah.
even when it's unintentional.
Uh-huh.
Bonnke's impact on David sparked this whole chain reaction,
Yeah,
even though he wasn't physically present for the revival itself.
absolutely. Bonnke heads back to the Transvaal and finds David leading this revival,
Wow.
which is already pretty amazing. But then we hear about these incredible healings that David performs.
Really?
First, there's a story of a sick child
Okay.
who is instantly healed after David prays for her.
And what's striking about that story is the mother's desperation.
Oh, wow.
She's lost one child to fever and is watching her second child suffer the same fate. You can imagine the depth of her fate and the weight of that moment when
Yeah.
David offers to pray.
Then there's the village chief's daughter who has never been able to walk.
Oh, wow.
He literally begs David to pray for her.
Wow.
It's such a raw expression of hope and desperation.
What I find so compelling about that particular counter is the cultural dimension. Here you have the village chief, a figure of authority and tradition, putting his trust in this young man who is essentially an outsider.
Right?
It speaks to the universal desire for healing and the way faith can bridge those cultural divides, you
Yeah.
know? And David, despite his youth and relative inexperience in matters of faith,
Right.
doesn't shy away from the challenge.
Yeah.
He goes to the chief's hut and prays for the daughter.
And then, boom,
Oh, wow.
you literally have cracking noises as the young girl's bones realign themselves.
No way.
And she walks for the first time in her life.
That's amazing.
Talk about a pivotal moment.
Yeah.
Not just for the girl and her family, but for the entire village.
Right?
The chief, completely overwhelmed by this, tells David he has to preach to everyone for 10 days.
Wow.
Okay, so now you've got David just weeks into his newfound faith thrust into this leadership position.
Right.
But here's what really struck me. David tells Bonnke he preached all of Bonnke's sermons,
Really?
memorized and delivered them word for word.
What's fascinating there is how it shows the different ways faith can manifest.
Yeah.
You have Bonnke, this powerful orator, drawing huge crowds,
Right.
and then David soaking it all up and replicating it in his own way.
Yeah.
It almost creates this teacher-student dynamic, even though they only had that brief interaction.
And think about the impact. Bonnke's message now being spread through David reaches this whole new community.
Right.
It makes you wonder what the ripple effect could be decades later.
Exactly. It shows how even seemingly small acts of faith can have far-reaching consequences.
Oh, yeah.
We often focus on the big dramatic moments, but
Mhm.
sometimes it's these quieter acts of dedication and learning that lay the foundation for lasting change.
So if we connect this back to our listener,
Yeah.
what's the takeaway from David's story?
Oh, that's a great question.
I mean, not everyone's going to lead a revival, but what could we learn from his journey?
I think David's story encourages us to embrace the unexpected opportunities for growth that come our way. He didn't shy away from the challenge, even though he was young and new to his faith.
It also makes you think about the impact we can have on others, even if it's not always immediately apparent.
Right.
Like maybe our actions today inspire someone years down the line.
Absolutely. David's story is a testament to the power of both personal transformation and the ripple effect that even small acts of faith can have.
Yeah.
It reminds us that we all have the potential to create positive change in the world, even if we never fully realize the extent of our impact.
Well said. Yeah, it really does make you think about those small moments that can change the course of someone's life.
Right.
David's story is so full of them.
Yeah.
That initial decision to approach Bonnke,
Uh-huh.
the healings he performs,
Yeah.
even the fact that he memorized those sermons.
And I think what's so powerful about those moments is that they weren't planned.
Right.
David didn't know he was going to encounter a sick child or the village chief's daughter.
Right.
He just responded to the situation in front of him with faith and compassion.
Right. It wasn't about some grand plan or strategy.
Right.
It was about being present,
Uh-huh.
being open to the possibilities,
Yeah.
and trusting that God would work through him.
Exactly. And that's something I think we can all apply to our own lives.
Yeah.
We don't have to have all the answers or know exactly what the future holds.
Right.
We just need to be willing to step out in faith, even in small ways, and trust that God can use us to make a difference.
So if we're connecting this back to our listener,
Okay.
what's one concrete action David's story inspires them to take? Maybe it's not about healing, but about stepping out in faith in their own way.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Maybe it's reaching out to someone who's struggling,
Oh.
offering a helping hand, or simply being more present and attentive to the needs of those around us.
Okay.
It could even be something as simple as taking a few minutes each day to reflect on our own faith journey
Right.
and ask God to show us how we can be a source of light and hope in the world.
Those are all great ideas.
Yeah.
David's story is a powerful reminder that faith is not passive.
Right.
It's an active force that compels us to step out in courage and love,
Yeah.
knowing that God can work through us to accomplish extraordinary things.
And remember, you don't have to have it all figured out to make a difference.
Right.
Just start where you are with what you have and trust that God will guide you.
Well said.
Mm.
And before we wrap up, a huge thank you to Business Referred for sponsoring this episode of Faith is the Podcast.
Yes, if you're looking to connect with local businesses and amplify your brand's reach, Business Referred is your go-to solution.
Reach out to them at info@businessreferred.com for all your local advertising needs.
And to all our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the inspiring story of David.
Yeah.
May his journey ignite a spark of faith within you and encourage you to embrace the extraordinary plans God has for your life.
Thanks for tuning in to Faith is the Podcast.
Yes.
We'll see you next time for another inspiring deep dive.